Welcome to the Premier Mindset by Premier Performance LLC. I'm your host, Trent Mailer, LCSW, licensed clinical therapist and performance coach, and this is episode 53. You're standing at the edge of a life you built, and nobody else notices the cracks, but you do. On paper, you look like a success. Accolades, promotions, recognition, money, respect. You've learned to perform under pressure. You've trained your mind and body to execute, to optimize, to deliver. Everyone thinks you're unstoppable. But here's the problem. Your internal compass has been hijacked. You're moving fast, achieving, winning, and yet the sense of ownership, of alignment, of this is mine is missing. That tension you've been ignoring, that quiet gnaw in your chest, the relentless mind even when everything is fine. It isn't incidental. It is a signal, and it's urgent. High performers like you are not confused because you are lazy. You're not lost because you lack discipline. You're lost because the metrics you're chasing, the path you're on, were designed by someone else, inherited, imposed, accepted without interrogation, and now every day you're compounding that drift. You're not just misaligned, you're building momentum in the wrong direction. Think about the cost for a second. It's subtle at first. Your decisions feel heavier than they should. Your energy is inconsistent. Creativity feels capped. You second guess yourself on tasks you normally execute with precision. You feel tension in moments that should energize you, and it spreads. Your team, your relationships, your influence, they feel it before you do. Misalignment leaks outward like a slow poison. Your nervous system doesn't lie. It knows before your conscious mind admits it. Tight chest, shallow breath, shoulders heavy, irritation where none should exist, distraction where focus should live. Subtle physiological cues, signals you were taught to ignore because winners push through. But these aren't obstacles, they are intelligence, tactical data you are refusing to read. Here's the brutal truth. A life that looks elite but feels foreign is wasted potential. Not because you lack skill, discipline, or drive, but because you are operating without ownership of your trajectory. You're running someone else's race. And the longer you do it, the higher the stakes become. Quick note before we fully dive in, this podcast is for education and performance growth. It's not a replacement for therapy or medical treatment. If there is something you need, make sure you go and get it. We also have all of our social media accounts linked in our episode description, so follow along in there and get involved in those communities as we continue to grow. Now let me frame it differently. Every day you ignore this, every yes to a project or expectation that doesn't resonate, every obligation you absorb out of default or approval seeking, is a transfer of your energy to someone else's priorities. And the subtle cost is not just stress, it is erosion. Erosion of focus, erosion of clarity, erosion of identity. The person everyone admires externally, that person may be crumbling internally. High performers are conditioned to achieve at any cost. That's part of your power, but it's also your vulnerability. Because your power amplifies misalignment just as much as it does results, the better you are at executing without interrogation, the faster misalignment compounds, and it compounds silently. By the time you notice it, it is baked into your leadership, your team culture, your daily decisions, and your sense of self. This is where most people fail. They think awareness is enough. They think motivation is enough. They try to just push harder to compensate. But that only drives the disconnect deeper. Alignment is not a motivational state. It is a structural performance parameter. It is operational, physiological, and strategic. Without it, execution suffers, relationships degrade, and long-term impact erodes. Here's the cold strategic reality. Alignment is leverage. When your metrics, your energy, your choices, and your trajectory all converge on a path you consciously own, performance doesn't just improve, it accelerates. Decisions become automatic, focused, precise. Creativity flows, influence expands, relationships stabilize, You're no longer fighting yourself in every meeting, every project, every decision. Your nervous system is now in sync with your intentions. And when misalignment is left unchecked, you become a high-functioning facade, impressive from the outside, but hollow from within. Energetically drained, subtly irritated, lapses in judgment, second guessing, emotional volatility, all invisible to others, but costing everything that matters: clarity, influence, longevity. This is your wake up call. If your life feels borrowed, if your achievements feel hollow, if your energy leaks in ways you cannot justify, you are not failing, you are off path. The first step isn't inspiration, it isn't reflection, it is intervention. Tactical, deliberate, and high performance. Because the life you allow unconsciously today is the life you inherit tomorrow. In this episode, we're going to expose the quiet sabotage of misalignment. We're going to break down the internal signals, the relational consequences, the structural performance costs, and the strategic tools that allow high performers to regain ownership. You'll see how subtle drift becomes cumulative erosion and how to reverse it before it calcifies into a life you didn't choose. Because here's the hard truth: success without alignment is expensive, not just in hours or money, but in identity, influence, and legacy. And if you ignore it, the world will continue to applaud results while your own life quietly slips through your fingers. This is the moment to confront it, the moment to read the signals your body and mind are screaming at you, the moment to take control before drift becomes regret. You wake up in the dark, before the alarm. You scroll through your phone, check emails, feel a creeping weight in your chest that no amount of coffee, exercise, or accomplishment can shake. Everyone sees your life as successful. Titles, bonuses, accolades, but inside it feels hollow, misaligned. You can't put a name to it, but you know it's there. That feeling, that quiet, gnawing sense that you're drifting on someone else's current, is exactly what we're talking about today. High performers, elite leaders, executives, athletes, they're supposed to know what's next. They're supposed to have the roadmap. And yet the most capable, disciplined people I know often feel lost, as though the compass in their chest has been swapped for a stranger's. Here's the truth: feeling lost doesn't mean you're weak. It doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're operating on the wrong metric. And that's exactly what we're going to make real. You felt the tension, the misalignment, the quiet erosion. But now let's put it in a frame you can see, hear, and feel. This is where the abstract becomes tangible. A high-performing executive who looked like he had it all, until the internal cost of chasing someone else's metrics caught up with him. I had a client, and of course, all clients and everything I share is all confidential, so don't worry, things have been changed and all of that, so no one will ever know. But I had a client who was a VP at a tech company, let's call him Mark, who had spent a decade chasing a promotion he didn't even want. When he finally got it, he sat in his new office, the plaque on the door catching the morning light, and he felt nothing. Pride, minimal. Relief, it was fleeting. Just emptiness, really. Everything around him said he had won, but internally he knew he had been playing someone else's game. And that dissonance didn't just stay in his chest, it leaked into his team. Decisions felt heavier, conversations felt flat. Team morale just dipped, and Mark couldn't understand why he was suddenly frustrating at meetings he used to thrive in. The first tool I want you to understand is what I call a metric audit. It's deceptively simple, but very powerful. You make a list of every standard you're chasing: titles, financial goals, metrics, expectations you absorb from your parents, mentors, society. Then next to each one you ask, did I choose this or am I inheriting it? In Mark's example, his audit revealed he'd inherited 90% of his roadmap. Promotions, revenue, goals, KPIs, they weren't aligned with his internal compass. Seeing it on paper, objectively, gave him clarity he couldn't manufacture through willpower alone. The magic of this tool isn't in the list itself. It's in confronting the reality that your external success can hide internal misalignment, and that the first step is to finding your path is recognizing whose path you're on. Let's make this real. Think about the last time you said yes to an opportunity, assignment, or role and felt your chest tighten. Not with excitement, but with resistance. Most high performers ignore that signal because they've been conditioned to push through discomfort. But that signal is a compass needle. It points to the misalignment you can't see through logic alone. Here's why this matters. Misalignment is not abstract. It affects performance. Decisions are slower, creativity is stifled, confidence erodes. You start second guessing not because you're weak, but because you're operating in a reality that isn't yours. That's why leaders like Mark can excel externally and feel like frauds internally. And I have people asking me about this regarding imposter syndrome. And sometimes it is imposter syndrome. Sometimes it's just this misalignment. So we have to actually get into this and figure out what are we dealing with. I want you to imagine a room. It could be a boardroom, a locker room, or your home office. You're sitting there, surrounded by success indicators. Emails, spreadsheets, accolades, social proof. Everyone else sees competence. Everyone else sees control. But inside, your nervous system is quietly protesting. Your gut tightens, your jaw clenches, your thoughts swirl. This physiological cue is critical. Your body knows what your mind often tries to ignore, and ignoring it is expensive. Here's the second part of the tool: energy signal tracking. This is about observing your body's response to roles, decisions, and environments. Where do you feel tension? Where do you feel lightness? What consistently drains you, and what consistently energizes you? Most people ignore these signals, labeling them as stress or pressure. But in reality, your nervous system is mapping alignment. This is high performance intelligence disguised as discomfort. Mark's breakthrough wasn't just in naming his misalignment, it was in tracking it. Meetings where he felt flat, projects that drained him, even casual conversations that left him exhausted. These weren't random. These were consistent indicators of his path being off course. The first time, he realized he could use these signals to make intentional adjustments instead of relying on motivation or willpower to compensate for being on the wrong track. Let's pause here. Take a mental inventory of your own life. Where do you feel this subtle resistance? Which areas produce stress without reward? Which achievements, if you were honest, feel hollow the moment you cross the finish line? These are the breadcrumbs leading you back to a path that's authentically yours. And there's nothing more powerful than living your life authentically and genuinely as you should. The stakes are high. High performers have a unique risk. You can achieve everything society says you should and still feel like a stranger in your own life. That internal dissonance leaks outward, subtly degrading leadership, team cohesion, and performance. It's silent sabotage. It's why your best ideas don't land, why your energy is inconsistent, why your focus fractures, and if ignored long enough, it doesn't just stall success, it erodes identity. Here's an insight most people never consider. Alignment is performance, not just emotional wellness. Alignment accelerates execution, clarity, and decision making. Your nervous system isn't separate from your career. It's the foundation of it. And that's why tools like Metric Audit and energy signal tracking are not soft exercises. They are tactical, high-performance instruments. Now let's bring it home with a scenario you might recognize. Picture a team meeting where every decision feels heavier than it should. You're snappy, distracted, or overly analytical. Team members start tiptoeing, unsure if they're going to trigger frustration. You think it's just a busy week or a tough project, but in reality, the misalignment is leaking into your leadership. This is subtle, hard to detect from the outside, yet it's costly. Opportunities are missed. Talent disengages. The invisible cost of being off path compounds daily. The challenge I want you to accept today is not do more or find your passion. The challenge is to map the reality of where you are, where your energy goes, and whose metric you are chasing. This is kind of part one, awareness. It's about clarity, not comfort. Awareness without action is only half the battle. but it's the foundation. You can't move strategically if you don't know where you're drifting. We'll expand on this next, where we will examine how misalignment affects not just internal states, but your identity as a leader, the culture you cultivate, the relationships you rely on. You'll see how this quiet dissonance in your daily routine echoes into the people and systems around you, and why ignoring it is a liability, not just an inconvenience. For now, take a single action. Grab a notebook. Write down every achievement, role, or expectation you feel compelled to pursue. And next to each, mark whether it originated from your own values or someone else's expectations. Circle the ones that consistently drain your energy. Track the physical sensation they trigger. This is not a reflection for the sake of insight, it's tactical reconnaissance. You're mapping terrain before planning a route. And in high performance terms, terrain matters more than motivation. Going back to Mark's story, it ends with a small but critical pivot. He didn't quit everything. He didn't explode. He didn't have some dramatic revelation. He simply started identifying misaligned metrics and consciously reducing energy spent there. That's the disciplined approach. Targeted correction, not chaos. It's strategic, it's controlled, it's high-intensity performance psychology applied to internal navigation. If you leave today remembering one thing from this section, let it be this. Success without alignment is an expensive illusion. Your body knows the truth before your mind admits it. The first tools you need to navigate are clarity about your metrics and attention to the energy they demand. That's the foundation for the path that is actually yours. By the time Mark walked into that leadership team meeting, he felt it in his bones. Something was off. Not just him. The air was thick with tension that he could neither name nor fix with a pep talk or a spreadsheet. He started the meeting the way he always did, reviewing metrics, timelines, and quarterly goals, but the words sounded hollow even to him. His team members nodded politely, but the subtle signs told him they were holding back. Pauses lingered a little too long. Questions felt measured. Energy that once flowed effortlessly now clotted in the room. Mark's experience is textbook misalignment at the identity level. The thing you chase because someone else told you they matter, title, status, prestige, begin leaking into how you operate. You start showing up reactive instead of strategic. You misread your own instincts. The nervous system responds to misalignment before your conscious mind catches up. You're alert, you're defensive, you're tense. This is where the metric audit escalates. Earlier we used it to identify whose scoreboard we're living on. Now we need to see the consequences of ignoring it. Every misaligned metric begins rewriting your leadership fingerprint. Mark had a long history of excellent judgment, but the misalignment distorted his internal calibration. What should have been routine decisions suddenly felt like negotiation with an internal adversary. The team felt it, and the more they felt it, the more they reacted, creating a feedback loop of subtle dysfunction. Energy in a room is never neutral. You think you can mask it with competence. You can't. The subtleties of your internal conflict leak into every conversation. You snap at an idea you usually embrace. You hesitate to offer feedback that would normally inspire your team. You feel impatient with questions that used to energize you. This is the relational cost of being off path. At this moment, we introduce energy signal tracking. It's the tool you deploy when misalignment starts showing in your relationships and leadership. The method is simple in principle but subtle in practice. Pay attention to physiological and emotional cues during decisions, interactions, and responsibilities. Where do you feel tension in your body? Tight shoulders, racing heart, distracted mind? Where do you feel a light, expansive energy? These signals are objective indicators of alignment. Mark's breakthrough came when he began tracking these signals during meetings. Instead of ignoring the gut tightening at a certain agenda item, he noted it. He realized the topics triggering tension weren't external, they were misaligned with what he actually valued. By simply acknowledging these signals, he could intervene strategically, pause, recalibrate, ask clarifying questions, or decide whether to delegate. He wasn't fixing the team, he was recalibrating himself to lead authentically. Here's where the stakes deepen. Misalignment doesn't stay contained in your chest. It seeps into your team's perception of you. Authority without authenticity feels off, even if it is unspoken. People pick up subtle cues faster than words. You notice the diffidence in their answer, the careful phrasing of opinions, the lack of ownership. High performers on your team will quietly disengage if your internal compass is off. And here's the kicker: the better they are, the more they sense it, the more fragile your influence becomes. We can illustrate this with an impactful scene. Mark asks a team member about progress on a strategic initiative. The team member hesitates. Mark's tone sharpens, not intentionally, but reflexively. Another team member pushes back, questioning a timeline. The first nods stiffly. The room energy fractures. Mark notices a subtle withdrawal and engagement across the group. He feels the frustration spike, the tight chest, the shallow breath, the quickened pulse. Normally, he would have handled it with calm authority, but the misalignment triggers a defensive response. The feedback loop is instant. This is the embodiment of identity-level misalignment affecting relational dynamics. Your internal pathlessness manifests externally as tension, defensiveness, and subtle coercion. People don't leave meetings consciously thinking my leader is off path. They feel it unconsciously in body language, tone, and pacing. Energy is contagious. Alignment amplifies it, misalignment corrodes it. Here's the tactical edge you can use. Use the energy signal tracking to intervene before it escalates. You notice the gut tightening? Pause, slow your breath, recenter your focus on values that are authentically yours, not inherited metrics. Observe without judgment. Respond strategically rather than reflexively. Over time, this creates a feedback loop where your internal state begins dictating the quality of your leadership, not your external obligations. Mark implemented a small behavioral experiment. During the next high-stakes meeting, he consciously checked in with his internal energy every 60 to 90 seconds. He identified moments where he was reacting to expectation rather than choice. He paused before responding. He asked clarifying questions instead of issuing directives. By the end of the meeting, tension dropped noticeably. The team felt the difference. Conversations flowed, insights emerged, and Mark began to regain a sense of agency he had been missing for months. Now let's underscore a critical point. This is high-performance work, not self-help fluff. It's not journaling for catharsis. It's active calibration of your nervous system to ensure leadership performance matches internal alignment. The stakes are relational. Team cohesion, engagement, and performance depend on it. Here's an exercise for you listening right now. In your next team interaction, pay attention to your physiological signs. Tension, constriction, rapid heartbeat, shallow breath. Note where your body is alert and reactive. Ask yourself, am I responding to an expectation I own or an expectation I inherited? This simple awareness is the first step towards strategic realignment. It's not easy. It requires discipline, focus, and honest observation. That's the work high performers thrive on. Another tool starts here. While Metric Audit identifies misaligned external measures, energy signal tracking gives you real-time feedback on alignment. Think of them as a map and a compass. One shows the terrain you've inherited, and the other shows how your body reacts to traveling it. Together, they provide tactical clarity for high-intensity decision-making. Let's return to the identity stakes. When you operate on the wrong path, you risk more than leadership misfires. Your relationships, professional and personal, suffer quietly. Subtle irritability, frustration over minor issues, a shrinking tolerance of ambiguity. High performers rarely see the shifts immediately, but they are cumulative. They shape how others perceive you and how you perceive yourself. This is why misalignment is not a soft concern, it's strategic leverage lost. By the end of this section, you should be asking yourself, where am I expending energy on inherited expectations? Where am I experiencing tension I can't justify? How is that showing up in the people I lead or rely on? Awareness alone is not enough. Next, we'll introduce tools for structural recalibration, leveraging nervous system and performance insights to correct course intentionally. Consider this. Success without alignment is sophisticated self-betrayal. It's possible to be admired, compensated, and respected while internally disoriented. That dissonance doesn't just hurt you, it subtly undermines every connection you have. The high performers who navigate this successfully do not ignore it. They engage it tactfully. They observe signals, they map metrics, they intervene before the misalignment propagates. That's the line between superficial achievement and authentic mastery. By the time you reach this section of your own journey, or Mark's journey in our earlier story, the misalignment is no longer subtle. It is embodied. Your nervous system signals it before your conscious mind catches the drift. What once was quiet frustration is now manifesting as cognitive narrowing, emotional volatility, and performance plateau. Mark began noticing it in small ways first. Decisions felt heavier, meetings exhausted him in ways that metrics could never explain. His usual mental agility had dulled. He would rehearse conversations mentally for hours, anticipating resistance that was often not there. He was competent, yeah, but efficiency and effectiveness were slipping under the radar. This is where the energy signal tracking escalates from relational insight to physiological calibration. The tool is no longer about just noticing tension in a meeting. Now it's about mapping your body's responses to your workload, your schedule, your decision-making patterns. What is happening is fundamental. Your nervous system has learned to anticipate misalignment. Your sympathetic activation is heightened when engaging in tasks that don't resonate with your authentic values. Heart rate spikes, breath shallows, muscles tighten. These are not signs of laziness, they are alerts. So let's be precise. High performers often interpret these signals as weakness, distraction, or even stress intolerance. Wrong. They are just data. They are objective indicators telling you this is not your path. Ignoring them leads to the phenomena we see in executives, elite athletes, and leaders everywhere. Burnout, plateauing performance, and an identity that feels brittle under pressure. Here's where future self-interrogation comes into play. This is another tool. This is your identity-based decision filter. You ask yourself questions framed from the perspective of your future self, the version of you who has clarity, alignment, and longevity. If I continue on this path, what version of myself am I enabling? Will this decision move me closer to a life I own or one I borrowed? Am I preserving energy for what matters or wasting it on inherited obligations? Mark started running these interrogations silently in the background during his workday. Decisions that would have triggered reactive tension now paused. Filtered through his future self lens, a meeting agenda item that initially felt necessary was reframed. Was it truly moving him towards self-authored goals, or was it advancing someone else's vision? That one shift reframed his experience of workload entirely. Let me be candid here. Implementing future self-interrogation is not passive. It is active, deliberate, and requires discipline. Exactly the kind of rigor high performers crave. This is not a feel-good exercise. It is a tool to identify the gap between the life you are building and the life you intend to build. Now we introduce controlled reduction. Once you identify misaligned commitments with future self-interrogation, the next step is subtraction. Strategic subtraction. Do not quit impulsively. You do not abandon responsibilities without foresight. You remove with intention. Controlled reduction is the method of pruning obligations, tasks, and behaviors that siphon energy from your authentic path. Mark's personal example is instructive. Early in his career, he accepted a high-profile leadership project because it looked impressive on paper and aligned with external expectations. Over time, he noticed mounting tension, frustration, and recurring physiological alert signals. He began a controlled reduction, delegating the parts that didn't align, renegotiating deadlines that compromised his strategic vision, and in some cases, just saying no entirely. The process was not dramatic. It was deliberate, surgical, and high leverage. And the results were immediate. Cognitive clarity improved, energy stabilized, and his leadership impact grew without increasing hours. As we continue to dive deeper, misalignment isn't just emotional or relational, it is a structural problem. The nervous system, cognitive function, and performance output are all interconnected. Misaligned action triggers chronic sympathetic activation. Cortisol rises subtly but persistently. Decision making deteriorates. Emotional regulation tightens like a wire under tension. The mind defaults to habit instead of strategy. Without intervention, plateauing performance turns into regression. Let me illustrate this with a tangible scenario. Imagine your morning routine. You wake up, energized to execute your goals, but every task in front of you aligns partially with inherited expectations rather than your self-authored path. You respond efficiently, yes, but your nervous system notes every misalignment. Your sympathetic activation is chronic. By noon, attention narrows. Creativity is blocked. Emotional regulation is fragile. Small frustrations with colleagues trigger disproportionate reactions. This is what misalignment looks like when left unaddressed. High performers are often blind to this because external markers, results, recognition, financial gain, all remain intact. The body and mind are signaling subtly, but the surface appears successful. This is why tactical tools like energy signal tracking, future self-interrogation, and controlled reductions are essential. They translate subjective discomfort into actionable insight. Now let's layer the personal controlled vulnerability story. I remember a period in my early career where I had been moving quickly, seemingly excelling, but felt an undercurrent of unease. My performance was visible to others, but internally energy was leaking. Meetings felt draining, tasks that once felt energizing now weighed me down. I recognized the physiological signals, tension in my neck, shallow breathing during high stakes conversations, and I used them to interrogate my path. The process was strategic. I asked, what commitments are mine, which are inherited? I began selectively reducing obligations that did not serve my alignment, and the effect was immediate and tangible. My clarity improved, my decision making sharpened, and my leadership presence became more consistent. This leads to a key insight. High performance without alignment is brittle. You may deliver outcomes, but it is a fragile sustainability. The combination of future self-interrogation and controlled reduction allows recalibration at the structural level. Nervous system, cognitive function, and leadership behavior all begin to align with authentic identity. Here's a practical integration exercise for listeners. First, identify one role, project, or commitment that is producing tension without clear alignment. Then apply the future self-interrogation. Does this move me towards the life I intend to own or towards someone else's definition of success? Then apply the controlled reduction. Delegate, renegotiate, or remove the commitment strategically. Finally, we end with tracking physiological signals during the execution of this exercise. No improvement or persistent tension. This informs further recalibration as you continue on this path. By the end of this section, your nervous system, cognition, and performance are no longer incidental. They are levers you control. This is how we create leverage. Misalignment is no longer just a feeling or a relational liability. It becomes a performance parameter you can optimize. The stakes have never been higher. A high-performing life without alignment is sustainable only for so long before you plateau, burn out, or relational erosion occurs. Correcting misalignment structurally is not optional. It is necessary for long-term mastery, personal agency, and authentic leadership. By this point, the pattern is clear. High performers who chase inherited expectations don't just feel off, they pay a cost that compounds over years. Misalignment infiltrates decisions, relationships, and the subtle architecture of your life. The small frustrations you shrugged off in the first section, the relational tension you noticed in the second part, the physiological alerts you explored in the last section, they are all part of the same story. Your life is building a shape you didn't choose. The question now is, what will you do with that story? Will you continue to honor inherited metrics, polishing the images of success? Or will you start authoring your own path? This is the point where metric audit, energy signal tracking, and future self interrogation, along with controlled reduction, coalesce into actionable alignment. Let's bring them together. Start with metric audit, the tool we introduced in the first section. Revisit your scoreboard. Ask whose definitions have I internalized? Which of my achievements are genuinely mine? High performers tend to be able to answer these questions superficially, but the challenge is digging beneath the surface, past the accolades and external validations, to the reality of lived experiences. This isn't about discarding achievement, it's about discerning ownership. Your victories matter more when you actually chose the path. Next, you layer the energy signal tracking. Your body knows what your mind sometimes hides. Track the tension, the fatigue, the emotional pinches that signal misalignment. Recalibrating your energy responses isn't optional, it's performance critical. By now, you should be able to notice your subtle physiological shifts in real time and use them as cues to interrogate alignment before decisions became habit, stress, or resentment. Here's where future self-interrogation becomes a linchpin. Look forward. Imagine yourself in 1, 3, or even 5 years. Picture the professional, the leader, the individual you want to be, not the version shaped by inherited expectation. Every decision, every commitment, every yes you issue should be filtered through that lens. The question is simple. Does this build the future I own? If it doesn't, it's time to intervene. And then enter controlled reduction, the surgical tool of subtraction. Alignment is not achieved by addition alone. Every misaligned task, project, or obligation you remove strategically frees energy for what actually matters. Controlled reduction isn't abdication, it's leverage. Removing one misaligned commitment amplifies your capacity for the aligned priorities that define your authentic trajectory. Let's bring the emotional stakes into focus. Imagine the cumulative years of chasing borrowed metrics. The life looks elite externally. Corner office, recognition, awards, external validation, but inside it feels foreign. You wake each morning in a body and mind that have adapted to function efficiently, yes, but in the wrong direction. Relationships subtly fray, creativity dulls, emotional bandwidth shrinks. That is the cost of misalignment, uncorrected. If you build a life that looks elite but feels foreign, you didn't win. You constructed a high-functioning facade while your authentic self waited for permission to breathe. Recognition, money, titles, they are meaningless if your internal compass is ignored. Alignment isn't optional. It's the only form of sustainability high performance respects. Controlled, intense, and unflinching. This is the truth every high performer needs to hear. Now integrate the story map. Mark, the executive from earlier, applies the full suite of tools. He audits his metrics. He realizes the scoreboard he's been chasing belongs to someone else. He tracks his energy. Physiological signs that he had ignored are now guiding his decisions. He interrogates his future self. Will this path produce a legacy he owns? Finally, he reduces commitments that do not serve alignment. The result is immediate: clarity, resilience, and a recalibrated trajectory. Leadership presence stabilizes, decision making sharpens, and energy returns. The lesson here is precise. Alignment amplifies performance. Misalignment erodes it quietly but relentlessly. By combining metric audit, energy signal tracking, future self interrogation, and controlled reduction, you create a high performance architecture that is sustainable, identity aligned, and strategically resilient. Consider leadership implications. High performers don't operate in isolation. Your misalignment leaks into teams, cultures, and organizational outcomes. Correct alignment, however, is contagious. When your energy is congruent with your authentic path, your team senses it. Decisions become clearer, communication becomes sharper, and relationships stabilize. You aren't just recalibrating your own trajectory, You're influencing every interaction and outcome under your leadership footprint. Take a moment and envision your legacy. Not just accomplishments, not just external markers, but the life you're authoring, the impact you're leaving, the trajectory you are controlling. Ask, are you building it consciously, or are you drifting in the current of expectations set by others? The tools we've used are your instruments for authorship. Without deliberate action, drift calcifies into a life you may one day resent. A high-functioning life misaligned with your identity. With deliberate action, you craft a trajectory of ownership, clarity, and authentic influence. High performers, this is your moment. Not education, not inspiration, action. Use the tools. Audit your metrics. Track your energy. Interrogate your future self. Reduce strategically. This is not optional. Your legacy, your leadership, and your life trajectory depends on it. If you want to elevate your alignment faster, more intentionally, and with accountability that ensures progress, Premier Performance is here to guide that process. Optimization requires rigor, courage, and consistent intervention. Because what you allow unconsciously today defines your achievements and your regrets tomorrow. Remember, the measure of true success isn't how impressive your life looks from the outside. It's how authentically aligned it feels from within. If your path feels borrowed, your performance is limited. Not by skill, intelligence, or effort, but by misalignment. Step into authorship, step into clarity, step into leadership that honors who you actually are. Resilient minds, premier results. That's what we're building here at Premier Performance. And if you want help doing it, just let us know. We'd love to do it with you. At the end of the day, recognition is the first step. If you're not able to notice any of the misalignment or any of the things you got going on, it's going to be really hard to work on it. So be willing to notice what you're doing in your life, what is holding you back. Be willing to look at the things that is a little bit uncomfortable. You might see something that can be improved and that can change your life in some pretty big ways. As always, this episode is meant to provide tools for performance, not replace individualized therapy. If you're struggling with anxiety, burnout, or persistent stress, professional guidance is critical. At Premier Performance LLC, we work with high achievers to implement strategies like these with precision, accountability, and results. I make it a point to give you actionable tools to find success in your life, so let me know if it's helping. I love staying connected with you all, so if something does make an impact in your life, I'd love to know what it is. Staying informed and being aware of what's working and what isn't helps inform me of better tools to talk about as we continue to go and continue to grow. So make sure to let me know. I love hearing, and I just want to stay connected with you all. So let me know about the successes. Let me know about the disappointments. I can just be a person for you to lean on and share these things with, and I'd love to hear. I'd also love to hear how this episode impacts you. If this episode itself has been powerful or impactful for you in some way, leave a review or send me a message. I love hearing about all these things. If there's something you feel like we could adjust or do differently, let us know. We'd love it. All feedback we can get. If there's someone in your life that you think could benefit from hearing this, that you feel is misaligned in their own life, send it their way. This might be the exact thing they need to hear to realize they are misaligned and they can get a better setup in life. Once we see something, we can do something about it. That's that recognition piece. On top of that, if this is helpful, leave us a review. It does help us spread the awareness and get this in front of more people, which is the ultimate goal. And if you have any questions, I definitely want you to reach out and let me know because I'd love to help and answer any question I can for you. You can reach out in a few different ways. You can reach out via email. My email is tmailer@premierperformancereno.com. My last name spelled Mahler. You could text or call me directly at 775-561-0056. We have the Instagram or the TikTok with the same name. Those are both named Premier_Performance_Reno. We then have the Facebook page and the LinkedIn page that both have the same name as well, which is both Premier Performance LLC. Then we have the Twitter or the X account, which is @Premier Reno LLC. And finally, our website, which is www.premierperformancereno.com. So get involved in those communities as we continue to grow. We post content literally every day with new podcast episodes coming out every week. Next week, we're going to go into how to upgrade our learning abilities so we can retain more, gain more, and really keep on growing in really powerful ways. So we'll get into that. That'll be fun. Otherwise, go be the best you can be. If you need anything at all, let me know. I love being a resource for you guys. Otherwise, put yourself out there and face a fear that you have, and you'll see where you go. You'll never know how far you can go if you don't push yourself to those edges. So let's see where it brings you. Otherwise, enjoy yourself and have some fun, and I'll see you soon.